Hello everyone, it's so lovely to see you all. Welcome to my Redway lesson. Before I can tell you what we're going to be doing today, I need to know that you're ready to listen and learn. So are you ready to show me the 4 rules of good listening? Lovely. Sitting still, staying quiet, looking at the person who's talking, listening to all the words. Lovely. Now I know that you're ready to listen and learn because you're showing me the 4 rules of good listening. Today we're going to be learning about all of the different things that we need in a story. And I know that you've been learning about these with the other teachers. In a story, we need... What does this mean? Who? Who is in the story? Who are the characters? In a story, we have... Do you remember what this means? That's right, it means where. Where does the story take place? Is it in a castle? Is it on a mountain? Is it in a hot desert? Where does the story take place? In a story we have... Do you remember what this means? What? What happens in the story? What happens at the beginning? What happens in the middle? And what happens at the end of a story? Now I know that you've been listening to the story Little Red Riding Hood with the other teachers. So together now we're going to listen to the story Little Red Riding Hood.
Little Red Riding Hood. Once upon a time, there was a girl called Little Red Riding Hood. She lived with her mother in a village near a forest. One day, Little Red Riding Hood went to visit her grandmother. She took a basket of food with her. On her way, Little Red Riding Hood met a wolf. "Hello," said the wolf. "Where are you going?" "I'm going to visit my grandmother, who lives in the forest," explained Little Red Riding Hood. The wolf ran to Grandmother's house. He went inside, put on a nightgown, and got into her bed. A little later, Little Red Riding Hood came to the house. She knocked on the door, then went inside. Little Red Riding Hood went over to her grandmother's bed. "Oh, Granny, what big ears you have," she said. "All the better to hear you with," answered the wolf. "Oh, Granny, what big eyes you have." "All the better to see you with," replied the wolf. "Oh, Granny, what big teeth you have," gasped Little Red Riding Hood. "All the better to eat you with," replied the wolf. "Help!" shouted Little Red Riding Hood, as she realised that there was a wolf in her grandmother's bed. She ran out the house. A woodcutter was nearby. He heard Little Red Riding Hood scream and ran into the house. The woodcutter hit the wolf over the head. The wolf ran away, and the Little Red Riding Hood never saw him again. The end.
Did you enjoy listening to the story? Do you know what the title is? What is a title? The title is the name of the story. Have a little think. What is the title of the story? What is the name of the story? Little Red Riding Hood. The title of our story is Little Red Riding Hood. Now I want you to think about who are the characters in the story. Press pause on the video for some thinking and talking time with your grown-up. Our question was, who are the characters in the story? The characters in the story are Little Red Riding Hood, the Big Bad Wolf, the Grandmother, and the Woodcutter. Now I want you to think about where the story takes place. Press pause on the video and talk to your grown-up about where the story takes place. Our question was, where does the story take place? The story takes place in two different places, so listen carefully. The first place is in the woods, because Little Red Riding Hood has to walk through the woods to get to her grandmother's cottage. The second place is in Grandmother's cottage. Now I want you to think about what happened in the story. What happened at the beginning? What happened in the middle? And what happened at the end of the story? Press pause on the video for some thinking time and talking time with your grown-up. Our first question was, what happens at the beginning of the story? At the beginning of the story, Little Red Riding Hood is walking to her grandmother's cottage. Suddenly, she meets a wolf who asks her where she is going. She replies, to her grandmother's. When Little Red Riding Hood isn't looking, the wolf runs to her grandmother's house. What happens in the middle of the story? In the middle of the story, Little Red Riding Hood arrives at her grandmother's house and notices that her grandmother looks a bit different. So she asks her 3 questions. What big ears you have? What big eyes you have? What big teeth you have? She then realises that it isn't her grandmother and that it is the big bad wolf. At the end of the story, a woodcutter hears Little Red Riding Hood scream, so he rushes to the cottage and he hits the big bad wolf on the head. And they live happily ever after. Now, for today's challenge, I need you to press pause on the video and draw a picture of the beginning of the story. I need you to think carefully about who is in the beginning of the story. Who are the characters? Where does the beginning of the story take place? And what happens? When you've finished, talk to your grown-up about who, where, and what happens at the beginning of the story. Enjoy your challenge. I hope you enjoyed your challenge. Take a look at my drawing.
So first I thought about where the story was taking place at the beginning. And then I soon realised it was in the forest because Little Red Riding Hood was walking to her grandmother's cottage. So I drew a picture of a forest, and in my forest I have trees, bushes with flowers on, grass and a pathway leading to her grandmother's cottage. Next, I thought about who the characters were at the beginning of the story. The grandmother wasn't in the story at the beginning, nor was the woodcutter.
It was just Little Red Riding Hood and the big bad wolf. Finally, I thought about what happened at the beginning of the story. Little Red Riding Hood was walking to her grandmother's when suddenly she bumped into a big bad wolf who asked her where she was going. So I drew the characters talking to each other. Now listen to me tell you the beginning of my story. Once upon a time, there was a girl called Little Red Riding Hood. She lived with her mother in a village near a forest. One day, Little Red Riding Hood went to visit her grandmother. She took a basket of food with her. On her way, Little Red Riding Hood met a wolf. "Hello," said the wolf. "Where are you going?" "I'm going to visit my grandmother, who lives in the forest," explained Little Red Riding Hood. I hope you enjoyed the challenge. Today we've been thinking about all the different things we need to make a story. We need to think about who are the characters, where the story takes place, and what happens. Today we drew the beginning of a story. Every story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Your next challenge is to either draw the middle or the end of the story. Don't forget to think carefully about who the characters are, where that part of the story takes place, and what happens. When you've finished, show a grown-up and tell them that part of the story. Don't forget you can email me your work. I hope you enjoyed the challenge and I'll see you soon.